Every gilded cage is built with walls of comfort. The only question is what you're paying for them.
Welcome to The Explainer. All around us, there are these invisible systems of control. They're literally designed to shape what you think, what you feel, and what you do. In this explainer, we're going to make them visible. So let's be honest with ourselves for a second. Most of us, we choose the comfortable lie. It's just how we're built. Our brains are wired for that feeling of warmth over cold, hard accuracy. We'd rather have the soothing story than the tough truth. And this feels like a harmless little quirk of our psychology, but believe me, it's anything but. See, that very human wiring, that need for comfort, for predictability, that's become the single most valuable resource of the 21st century. It's the primary target for some of the most sophisticated, most powerful systems of influence ever created. So in this explainer, we're going to trace that path of control. We'll start with our own psychology, then we'll look at the institutions that train us, and finally, we'll get to the global technologies that are now exploiting us on a massive, massive scale. All right, let's get right into it. It all starts with a simple, maybe even an unsettling truth. The weak spots, the vulnerabilities, they aren't out there. They're hardwired directly into our own minds. Think about it. From the time we're kids, we're taught that being obedient is a good thing, right? It's a virtue. But then you have something like the famous Milgram experiment, and it revealed something truly chilling. Most ordinary people just like you and me, will inflict pain on a complete stranger just because someone in a lab coat tells them to. That shows you something really important. Obedience isn't morality. It's more like a program we've been conditioned to run. Have you ever been in a meeting where you can just tell nobody gets it, but everyone's just nodding along? Yeah, that's this principle right here. It's called pluralistic ignorance. Your silence becomes your consent. We just go along with it because we assume everyone else agrees, and in doing so, we help reinforce a lie that privately nobody actually believes. It's wild, and it's exactly how a false consensus gets manufactured. And here's the kicker, the really crucial point. Our brains don't really crave happiness. Not really. What they crave is predictability, routine. We will actively, and I mean actively, choose a familiar, even comfortable misery over the risk and the chaos of the unknown. And what does that do? Well, it makes us super resistant to change and, honestly, incredibly easy to manage. Okay, so we have these built-in vulnerabilities. How are they exploited? Well, it starts way, way before anyone ever puts a smartphone in our hands. Our psychological tendencies are systematically shaped, almost from birth, by the very institutions we grow up in. The modern school system, it has its roots back in the Industrial Revolution. And its original design, if we're being honest, was less about enlightenment and more about creating what the philosopher Foucault called docile bodies. Basically, a workforce conditioned by ringing bells, strict schedules, and standardized rules, all to get them ready for the factory floor or the office cubicle, so the real lesson wasn't critical thinking, it was compliance. And that logic of control, it absolutely extends into our adult lives. Now, to be crystal clear, this is obviously distinct from the pure horror of chattel slavery. But this framework is really useful because it shows how some of the same principles, things like constant surveillance, exploitation, and really limited autonomy, which were perfected on plantations, have been adapted and retooled for the modern workplace. It's all about prioritizing predictability and compliance. But here's the thing, these older, kind of analog systems of control, they've just been supercharged. They've been plugged into a powerful new engine, global technology. Okay, you really need to know this term. It was coined by the scholar Shoshana Zuboff, and it's absolutely key to understanding our world now. This isn't just about companies collecting your data. No, it's so much bigger than that. It's about them creating entirely new markets that trade in one thing, predictions of what we will do next. You see, your life isn't the product. The real product is predictions about your future. So how does it work? Well, it's basically this 4-step process, and it's the engine of the entire modern internet. First, they take your personal experiences, everything you do, as free raw material. Then, they feed all that data into a predictive machine. And here's the crucial part. They then start to subtly nudge your real-world behavior to make sure those predictions come true. And boom, that's the profit. Your personal life has literally become a factory floor for data products. And that modification part, that's where AI comes in. And look, this is way beyond just showing you an ad for a pair of shoes you looked at last week. We're talking about leveraging your deepest cognitive biases, your fears, your desires, your addictions. All of it is used to keep you hooked, to keep you scrolling, and to subtly steer your behavior in whatever direction is most profitable. And get this, if you think you're mostly just interacting with other people online, well, you might want to think again. There's this idea called the dead internet theory, and it suggests we've reached a point where nearly half of all internet traffic isn't human, it's bots. So think back to that idea of manufacturing consensus. It's not just happening in a small meeting room anymore, it's happening at a global scale with an entire army of bots. You know, what's so interesting here is that decades ago, a media critic named Neil Postman warned about this. He said television would eventually turn everything, even serious stuff like education, into entertainment. Well, that process has now been perfected by algorithms. They blur the lines so completely that half the time, we don't even know if we're being educated, entertained, or, well, controlled. So you take our innate psychology, you add our institutional conditioning, and then you pour rocket fuel on it with artificial intelligence. This convergence, it's leading us to a new and, honestly, a deeply disturbing frontier. And this is where it's heading. Predictive emotional programming. It's a world where these systems don't just guess how you're feeling. They actively program the content you see to make you feel a certain way, all to achieve some commercial or political goal. They're not just manipulating what you do anymore. They're manipulating the very emotions that drive you. And the craziest part, the more this happens, the more we just accept it. That line between a helpful suggestion and a controlling command, it gets completely blurry. And we just passively accept being steered by these unseen forces because we mistake the manipulation for simple convenience. If you think this sounds like science fiction, it's not. This is the endgame. This is the ultimate expression of these technologies already in action. China's social credit system. It's a real-world, society-wide system of algorithmic social control, a vast network of rewards and punishments, all designed to engineer a perfectly predictable, perfectly compliant population. Okay, so if this is the path we're on, from our own internal wiring to these massive global systems of control, then we have to stop and ask a really fundamental and really urgent question. Shoshana Zuboff's point here is so profound. Think about it. If our future behavior is being systematically predicted, packaged up, and sold off to the highest bidder, do we even still have the free will to create our own future? Or is that future being stolen from us, one click at a time? So here's the bottom line. The systems we've just talked about are designed for one purpose, to make us predictable and therefore profitable. They learn our vulnerabilities and then they sell our futures. Which brings us to the fundamental question, the red line we have to figure out as a society. At what point does all this helpful personalization become just plain predation? And maybe the even harder question is, what are we supposed to do when the cage they've built for us starts to feel way too comfortable to even want to leave?